Welcome to the Tow.Club Industry Podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Today I have Adam Osterloo from Toolz. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing great, Art. How are you?
I'm pretty good, man. Thanks again for joining us.
Yeah.
I'm going to get right into it. And for the audience that's listening and watching, I mean, full disclosure here, I know Adam for many years. He's been in and around the industry of towing for many years and equipment. And so I think he's very well seasoned and well qualified to discuss some of what we are going to be addressing today. I'm going to start with this, Adam, just so everybody, kind of gets to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about you and Tow Tools and kind of how you got here.
Okay. Well, I got into the towing industry back in the mid 90s, just running calls like anybody else that starts. And fast forward, got into sales in 2013, selling tow trucks. And through that connection of selling tow trucks, I got to know many of the different manufacturers in the accessories world of towing and recovery. And that's how I got to know Tow Tools.
Okay.
And then fast forward again, I used to have my own store and shop and everything, and I used to carry Tow Tools as one of the brands in our store. And when I closed that store in 2023, a few months later, I started as a manufacturer rep for Tow Tools, running some sales work and doing doing the show circuit and all that kind of stuff, the different tow shows around the country, and setting up dealers and selling to end users as well.
Nice, nice.
So
Yeah,
that's
I mean, I often run into you at the shows. It's always great to see you. I
yeah,
recently ran into you at the Vegas show, so that was
yeah,
nice for us to get back in touch. We obviously, I know you probably have to travel a lot for work and, like you said, do the shows. I did want to ask, just to follow up on Tow Tools, how much is what you guys are selling sort of your own brand and creation as opposed to being a distributor for other products and brands?
Uh, for what we focus on, I would say it's about 90% Tow Tools original equipment.
Okay.
Now we do work with other partners, and we do sell we do brand some other products with the Tow Tools brand.
Okay.
But the majority of what we do is specialized into synthetic recovery rope.
Okay.
And we use a product, exclusively use a product for our super slings and our soft shackles and that. It's called Honeywell Spectra Fiber. Now we use some other products for some of our other things, winch ropes and kinetic energy ropes. But the Honeywell Spectra Fiber is a very high quality synthetic fiber, and we chose that. It's a little bit more expensive, but we still maintain competitive pricing and all that kind of stuff, even though using that higher grade uh, synthetic fiber in our products. But that is we're the only manufacturer in the towing and recovery industry to be using that fiber, that grade of fiber, and so that's our bread and butter right there,
Okay.
is that synthetic rope.
That's kind of like your proprietary sort of
Yeah,
product that
yeah.
is the basis for a lot of your recovery products. Okay.
Right, right. Yeah, and there's other manufacturers in that industry that are using different synthetic fibers for the ropes, recovery ropes and
Right.
slings and that kind of thing.
Okay.
But that makes up the bulk of what Tow Tools does, and what we're about is that high quality recovery rope, and it's used in the towing recovery industry heavily. Of course, being Tow Tools, it kind of the name fits, but we also find lifting and search and recovery, search and rescue applications for it. Some of our products been used in the like lifting the pieces of the sub that imploded down on its way to Titanic. When that was
Oh,
recovered, that was recovered with our stuff.
wow.
Some other things, when there's something that's really expensive, it seems like
An
people
airplane.
come to us.
An airplane thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Expensive equipment that's being lifted onto a building or something like that.
Yeah, even interestingly enough, there was, well, a few years ago, back in the COVID, when there was suddenly this chip shortage that the
Yeah,
world experienced, and the U.S. is like, "Hey, we need to be doing stuff, in our home turf." And
sure.
so, different manufacturers came in, and there was one that was set up in Arizona in the last few years. And when they moved those things in, those machines, um, I don't know how many millions of dollars they are to,
Oh, yeah.
the
Probably
machinery.
hundreds of millions of
Yeah,
dollars. Yeah.
the machinery to go in to make those things, that was lifted in with Tow Tools
Oh,
slings.
nice.
So
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah, it's cool, it's neat, and
Yeah,
but yeah, that represents some of the quality that we pay attention to, that
yeah.
it's a trustworthy product.
I mean, I've been in the industry now for roughly 25 years, and I think it's pretty obvious that we've seen rigging and recovery and in our space sort of morph from strictly chain, to
Yeah.
now synthetic fibers of all various types. But I did want to ask, how is the products utilized for recovery and sort of the technology? How is that changing with respect to towing, and in particular heavy duty towing? Because I noticed a lot of your products, it's a lot of the HD guys,
Yeah.
the guys that really have that stick, that recovery boom capability that can lift a lot of weight, extend it out. How is that changing? I mean, for us laymen's, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of times when we think technology, one of the first things we think about is like computers, software,
sure.
phones, stuff like that. But in all reality, the chair was technology at one point. The kitchen table, sitting at a table, that was a new thing at one point,
Sure.
like
Yeah, yeah,
centuries ago, millennia ago. But so technology can be, it can be even in the strength of the equipment that we're using, the tow boom,
right.
the recovery boom, the underlift, all that kind of stuff. So when you think of it in that term, um, the rope, the synthetic rope specifically, is a huge leap forward in technology for the towing and recovery industry, not only because of the strength that it represents. So comparatively, you can run, they're roughly the same, a little bit higher than steel rope. If you compare winch lines, let's talk about winch lines for a second. You take your synthetic winch line, it'll have equal to or up to double the working load limit of a comparable
Fuel
size
rope. Yeah,
steel rope.
yeah,
But it has somewhere around up to 3 times the brake strength. So, brake strength is everything's going to break at some point. Doesn't
yeah.
matter what it is. Biggest what am I trying to say? The um, I gotta stop and think of the word that I'm trying to say.
No problem.
But anyways, the rebuttal, I guess, of using synthetics compared to steel or
The
chips
best
or something
argument.
like that, is that, well, if I run it across a concrete block, it's gonna rip and tear. Well, that's going to happen no matter what you're using. It may not happen in that moment with the steel rope, but
Sure.
it's going to damage the steel rope, causing it to break later. So
Yeah, it'll abrade.
yeah,
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 it'll abrade.
everything's going to break at some point. So when you think about the safety factor of having a higher brake strength, and then combine that with the fact that synthetics don't have a winding memory to them. So
Mhm.
again, on the winch line idea, when you wrap that winch cable around a steel drum, the steel develops a memory of being bent in a certain way. And when that line breaks, that memory causes that steel to recoil and come flying somewhere.
Yeah,
Now, anytime something breaks, there's a certain amount of kinetic energy that's built up that's going to release and it's going to move.
sure.
But the synthetic rope releases that energy, it will dissipate over space, but then it just drops, and it doesn't have the added tension of recoil that's pulling it towards you and taking out your legs or your spleen or your arm, or
Yeah.
God forbid, your head. So something like that makes the synthetics hugely more safe. Great, much greater safety factor in the synthetic ropes.
I've seen the videos of the differences, by the way.
Yeah.
And for those listening, you can go on YouTube and you can watch, you can see videos of a synthetic rope being tested to the point
Right.
of breakage and a steel rope. And so, yeah, I have seen, I haven't witnessed it firsthand, but I've seen the videos, and it is a remarkably different way. It's
Right.
a different event when a synthetic rope breaks versus a steel rope.
Right. Right.
And I
Yeah.
imagine I imagine the same is true between a chain and a sling.
Yeah, so a chain will stretch over time. This is a thing. Like chains are still highly used and highly necessary in the
Mhm.
towing and recovery industry. When you do go to that wreckage, be it a light duty or a heavy duty wreckage, and there is cut, bent, sharp edges, all that kind of stuff. Well, that's when you got to pull out the chain, because
Right.
yeah, common sense says if you put a rope, synthetic or otherwise, on a
Or a
sharp
sling.
object and you put
Yeah.
tension on it, it will cut and it'll snap
Sure.
very quickly, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is, like when you get into search and recovery stuff, and you run, fire calls and all that kind of stuff, or climbing, you run a rope, over a sharp object, it's going to cut. So you
Yeah.
got to pull out the chain at some point.
Yeah.
But chains stretch over time, and that stretching reduces the chain's capability to maintain its link. And so those stretched links become the weakest link in the chain, and at some point it snaps. Chain has more mass to it,
Right.
and so with that energy that's built up under tension, that mass goes flying, and yeah, it can do a lot
Yeah.
of damage,
Well, as opposed to,
as
the
opposed to a
breaking point of
rope.
a
Yeah.
sling, right? Which
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
behave differently.
Yeah, because a sling, I don't know, percentage wise of weight difference as far as actual lifting weight.
It's quite a bit lighter.
Yeah, but when you climb up on top of a shipping container to rig it to lift, or to tip it back over or whatever, and you got to climb up there with chains, hung around your shoulder or your neck, or you grab some container lift slings and you carry those up. It's like night and day difference. Like
Of
I can
course.
climb and I'm not exhausted when I
Yeah.
get up to the top.
Yeah.
So that's just proof that the synthetics are much lighter, and
Yeah.
then just the simple fact that they're not going to kill you when they break.
Well, I think, for those that are listening that are in business for themselves as opposed to just an operator listening, one of the vantage points from an owner, I own a small towing company, is what can I do to reduce the risk of injury?
Right.
And, when you think of injury, this is not just, oh, well, if the wire rope breaks, or, oh, if the sling breaks. This is like you said, a 10-foot, uh, I don't know, grade 80 5/8 chain is heavy, right?
Right.
So you're talking about lifting, you're talking about risk of injury. So we should be thinking about ways to mitigate injury. And I think the nylon products, or I shouldn't say nylon, because I know that there's a
Yeah,
lot
it's the
of different
difference between
materials.
nylon and synthetic. Yeah.
Yeah, but the synthetic products, um, clearly they're lighter.
Oh
Clearly
yeah.
they're more manageable to handle.
Yeah.
Clearly, like as you mentioned, if you're climbing on a wreck, right?
Yeah.
Or you're even just pulling it out of your toolbox, you know,
Right.
you're lifting at some point. The
Right.
terrain's not always going to be forgiving. So it seems to me that, if I don't work in the heavy duty space personally, but it seems to me that if I was, I would want a product that's more manageable to handle. Uh,
Yeah.
in addition to the lower risk of, like, hey, if something breaks, the risk of, a chain link or a wire rope coming back at me
Right.
clearly is less if I'm using a synthetic product, right?
Well, and in the workplace environment, whether it be towing or otherwise, the mass number of injuries in the workplace are more related to lifting, bending, um,
Correct.
stooping, that kind of stuff. Back injuries, small cuts, bruises, pinching, those types of injuries, largely outnumber the 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 more extreme injuries of a
Right.
of
Yeah.
something coming back and hitting you, taking a limb off,
Right.
death, that kind of thing. So those types of things are, like you say, they're still important. Like, lifting chains out of the toolbox. If you do it wrong, and all of us do it, no matter how strong we are, as we get older, like I'm 45, and I get out of bed sometimes and I feel like I've injured myself. So,
Right.
it
No,
could be something that's really small and seemingly insignificant. And you're like, oh crap, now I got to
yeah.
go to the doctor.
I hear you. And not to mention, Adam, I think too, it's important to add that, when you pull up to a recovery site, it's not like you're pulling up to a level concrete slab, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
you could be off-road, there could be potholes, there could be an angle between the toolbox door and the surface that you're standing on. And so, I used to years ago do heavy duty towing and recovery. And I remember by the way, this is quite some time ago. We're talking 15 years. The synthetic products were not as prevalent at the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I remember, for example, towing a vehicle with a very set back front axle. And I remember, like, do I want to extend my safety chains with this 5/8, grade 100 chain, or do I want to use the sling? It's like, I'm using the sling, man. And
Right.
this
Right.
is not even a debate, because I'm under there and it's difficult and it's a funny angle and I've got to drag this chain. So yeah, no doubt. I did want to ask, because Adam, what you guys do is pretty unique in the industry. What I see often is people that are selling towing, recovery, and related products are often selling other brands. And you guys are unique in the sense that you guys have, for at least a high percentage of your products, your own brand. And I wanted to ask, is there anything that you build that's very custom and specific and proprietary that towers should really hear about? Is there a product that you have in mind that's really, like you're kind of like the only one with such a product?
Well, yeah, there's a couple, at least for now, and once we say it, then somebody will copy it.
Sure.
But that's the way things go. So we have our synthetic uh, shackles, so soft shackles. A lot of people have those, but we've combined a shackle with a wheel, and it's now a lighter and more capable snatch block.
Oh,
So
okay.
this wheel is cut from a solid block of aluminum. We can go 4-inch, 6-inch, and all the way up to 10-inch. And the 10-inch wheel can handle like a 1-inch cable on it, 7/8, 3/4, 1-inch cable on
So
it.
it's designed to be used with steel or
No,
okay,
no. Now you could put steel rope in it, but it's an aluminum block, and eventually that steel's just going to chew up that aluminum.
okay,
Um, so you could use it for that if you needed to, but we recommend that you don't. Um, but what it's made for is to run with a full synthetic system from the drum all the way to the wreck, or at least from the drum to the chain. So
okay,
again, if you're wrapping around some torn up, bent up, twisted up steel that's just going to cut anything you put on it, and chain is
right,
your only option. Then obviously you're going to connect our synthetic slings or soft shackles to that chain. And then you're going to come back to the truck, and if you need to 2-part or 3-part that line, you're going to need snatch blocks. And so we've got a snatch block system with the 10-inch wheel and a 1-inch soft shackle that'll handle up to, pulling this off the top of my head, I think about 130,000 pounds.
wow,
And so,
A lot of weight, man.
yeah, a lot of weight.
Yeah.
You know, when you configure your weight, your rolling resistance, all that kind of stuff, you can get to those kind of numbers rather quickly,
Mm.
especially on your super heavy loads and stuff like that. So we've got a couple of customers around the nation that are running synthetic rope on their rotators and on their heavies, synthetic winch line, and so they are 100% synthetic from the drum to the wreck, and they're using these wheels, these snatch block systems, with great success. And so that's a right now that 10-inch wheel is an exclusive in the industry. It's exclusive to Tow.Tools. We're the only one that can do that. And part of the reason we can do that is because of our we're kind of a subcorp of I don't know that that's the legal term of it, but sort of a subcorp of the Tesoro Group, which
Okay.
is a contract manufacturer in the automotive industry, and you'll find Tesoro products in just about every make and model of
So you're a
car, truck, and all
subsidiary.
that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So with that connection and that manufacturing ability, we're able to make these things and bring them to market. And so it's a pretty incredible product. Another one that we've just released is a 1-inch sling, super sling. So we used to do, and we still do, 3/8 all the way up to 7/8 super slings in 8, 10, and 12-foot lengths. Um, Now we've got a 1-inch, and that request comes from both towers and from other lifting customers of ours. I mentioned, we're lifting
Trains.
submarines, we're lifting,
Yeah.
lots of different things.
Yeah.
And so they're looking for, so that 1-inch rope is 44,000 pounds rated in a basket. So if
Okay.
you loop it, just as a basket form, it's 44,000 pound rated. And that just came to market within the last few months.
That's impressive. I wanted to ask you, because just getting back to your initial product you were discussing, the pulley
Yeah.
with the 10-inch aluminum wheel. Um, just in terms of, because again, getting back to the conversation about how easy it is for operators, that's got to be quite a bit lighter than a comparable steel snatch block. Am I right?
Oh yeah. So if you have well, I'm trying to think how much a
I mean, a 10-inch
12-ton
a
snatch
steel
block weighs.
slack snatch block has to. I
Yeah,
remember picking these things up. They're really heavy.
yeah, they are. They're heavy, and you can get, you can go with the skookum blocks, which are a perforated metal. There are other types of steel snatch blocks out there on the market that are lighter than the traditional steel snatch blocks.
Sure.
They still don't come close to a synthetic uh, um, soft shackle and an aluminum block of, a block of
Yeah.
aluminum that's 10 inches
I was
around.
just thinking about how
So,
much lighter it would be and easier to handle, right? Like,
so there's pictures. If you go to Tow.Tools Facebook page and peruse around there, you'll find some pictures of different shows that we've done. And we we put the 1-inch shackle with the wheel around our neck, kind of like kind of like a rapper with chains. You get the gold chains,
yeah.
and but it is so, like, I can pick that thing up. So I am drawing a blank because we're on the spot here, but 100,000, 130,000 pound capacity on on a 1-inch and a 10-inch wheel, 1-inch soft shackle and 10-inch wheel. So let's just say it's a 50-ton snatch block. Okay, so it's a 50-ton snatch block that you can buy for under $1,000
And you can
retail,
pick it up.
and you can pick it up with your arm fully extended,
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah.
and you don't have to be Superman to do it.
Right.
Like,
So right there, there's a tremendous benefit
oh
to
yeah,
the operator because now, I remember, so I've been in towing for quite some time, and I remember, um, I'm gonna guess the biggest snatch block I probably ever used in recovery. My experience in heavy recovery was limited compared to the people that do this day in and day out. However, I remember, I'm gonna say it was a 20-ton snatch block.
hmm
This is close to your body. Okay,
right,
this is two hands. These things
yeah,
are not light. And I'm not going to claim to remember how much it weighs, but
yeah,
not less than 60 or 70 pounds. I'm pretty positive.
yeah,
Right. Like, and
yeah.
so, yeah, to have double that capacity
Well,
and
that's the
have
thing.
whatever, let's say half the weight or.
you,
or
you you
less.
you say, and you see it too, in the industry, especially in heavy duty. Everybody wants to be a heavy duty operator. They all want to drive the big shiny truck with the rotating boom and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes until they go and they have to pick up the snatch blocks and they got to start rigging a big
Right.
wreck. Pull out all the heavy chains, all the heavy snatch blocks, pull on that 3/4 inch line that's wrapped up on the drum, that pulls really, really, really tough. Like you're throwing your whole body into
Oh,
yanking
yeah.
that thing off of the truck. So yeah, and especially with the snatch blocks, because they're hanging in a toolbox. So you're reaching,
Right.
lifting, and
Yeah.
lifting it up to get it off the hanger or out of the floor of the box,
Right.
and then you're able to haul it out. And yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a bit there, and I agree with you. I remember the transition from light duty to medium duty to heavy duty. Medium duty, I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm towing box trucks, and
Right.
I'm doing tractor swaps for trucking companies, and then
Right.
heavy duty, and then once you get that mixer that's on its side or whatever, right? You're like, oh my God, these chains are heavy. Oh my God, these snatch blocks are
Yeah.
heavy.
Yeah.
And you're in the mud or whatever. I mean, it's yeah. I
Yeah.
I would tell towers, think long and hard before you think you can just jump into this space. Uh,
Oh yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that kind of leads me to my next question, and um, what's on the horizon, especially for heavy duty? Are there areas of the industry we should pay more attention to? Are there areas of the industry that we think or you think are subject to significant change, which could be via innovation from people like you and your outfit, or could be from government intervention, legislation? What do you think? What do you think is going to be the driver of the biggest change?
Mm. There's a lot of things changing in the industry. A number of things come to mind. Probably one of the biggest ones that I see, just from my perspective, talking. So I have really a cushy job. I get to work from home. I don't have to be out in the rain and the wet, and I get to serve the towing industry, which is the greatest group of company owners and workers in the world. There's really nobody better out there than the towers, and so it gives me a really wide range of everything going on around the country, because I talk to people all over the nation, sometimes outside the nation. And I see the one of the biggest things that I see coming down the pike is regulation. And that
Don't we
regulation,
already have enough of that?
well, in your state, Art, you have way too much.
Yeah, no, we do. Yeah, we definitely do.
But
There's no logical argument,
no,
yeah,
no,
against
but it
that.
spills over the border, and it goes across the nation. Like, the old adage, what starts in California eventually makes its way to the
Sure.
East Coast.
And in some
And
cases, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
and in some cases it's good. Innovation comes from many different places, many different sources, and a lot of times innovation is good. Innovation brings change, and we generally, as human beings, don't really like change. We like our cheese in the same spot, and
Yeah.
we like our chair when we come home, all that kind of stuff. But regulation centered around pricing, training, equipment. Um, I have in my truck sales history, I've seen all kinds of equipment out there. Everything from the brand new stuff to the old stuff, and I learned on the old stuff. Like very few. It seems like there's fewer and fewer people that know how to sling a car anymore. That know how to run, an old gear-driven winch. All that kind of stuff. Split booms. That's just no none of the new people are learning that stuff. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You need to learn. You need to know the equipment you're working with. But the innovation comes from that history. However, the way things continue to modernize in the automotive industry and the heavy truck industry, you can't really get away with using that old stuff as
Yes.
much as you used to.
Yeah.
You need the newer technology out there to
The
handle
vehicles have changed.
the vehicles. Yeah.
I mean, that's
So
that's the driver right there.
huge changes in how you handle vehicles because of these batteries. um, you've got to not only be concerned with damaging a very, very expensive car. You know, when I was still driving a tow truck and people would complain about a $75 tow, and I'm towing a $55,000-$60,000 Cadillac, I'm like, what is your problem? You know, you could
Yeah,
afford the car, but you can't afford to maintain it or take care of it. That's not my problem.
it's very frustrating.
Yeah, you go into nowadays, you go to, you know, a Tesla that's really worth darn near close to $100,000.
Some
They may
cases,
not have paid,
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
know, different things make that price, you know, change,
sure.
uh, subsidies and whatnot. But at the end of the day, that's a huge uh, chunk of change sitting there. So you need to worry about, you know, not damaging it, obviously, cosmetically or mechanically when you're picking it up. But you also need to worry about electrocution. You need to worry about fire, those kinds of things, and not just in the Teslas. You know, any vehicle, hybrid or otherwise. And then you've got, you know, in the heavy industry, you've got these trucks that are getting lower and lower to the ground, so to speak, with their fairings and all that kind of stuff for wind, for, you know, fuel efficiency. All this stuff is in your way, and so you've got to really pay attention. And as things go, the government gets more involved in how these things are regulated. And
Oh, I
so
know.
here in Alabama, where it's not necessarily a Western state, but we're enough behind the times in many respects that still a little bit of the Wild West down here in some areas. They were just faced with some new regulations requiring training, that every tower be certified, requiring equipment, that if you're going to be maintaining any stretch of interstate, you have to have a rotator, you have to have recovery bags, cushions,
Mhm.
lifting bags, and that kind of thing. So this kind of stuff is coming, and it's one of those things that it's not nice to say. It's sort of a like it or lump it. It's coming for you anyways.
Yeah,
You can't stop it. You can hate it as much as you want to, but you can't stop it. The
yeah,
only way to effectively deal with it is to get involved in it.
yeah.
And so different organizations that are providing the training,
I was going
embrace.
to ask you about that, Adam. Sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
for those that are listening and watching, I mean, what would you say, whether it's your neighborhood or nationwide, what would you say is the best place to go for training and staying informed, apart from subscribing to this podcast, of course?
Yeah, plug for the Tow.Club. Great place to find information and learn things about your industry and what equipment you're working with. But no, your hands-on training and certifications, probably in my experience, and I know I'm going to leave somebody out here, but in my experience, your two top places for training is ERSCA and RecMaster. I have been to both classes. I know trainers on both sides, and these are excellently trained and well experienced, industry knowledgeable. They've been around it for years and years and years, that are teaching you not only the mathematics and the geometry and the physics of everything, but they're also giving you real world experience and passing that on. It's one of the greatest ways that we train our people in this industry, is that real world passing on of knowledge of, here's what I learned how to deal with this situation because I've been in that situation before.
Right.
um, and so those things, they come with a degree of difficulty. I've seen guys fail the class, the simple classes. And that's unfortunate, but that's also, failure is one of the ways we learn. And
It's also how to mitigate a lot of risk,
it
right?
is,
It's like
yeah.
if this guy, I mean, by the way, not to suggest that if you fail the class, you don't know what you're doing, but
No, 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 no.
but at the very least, if there's an industry-wide consensus that, hey, this is the type of strength needed to lift X, then towers should be one of the best recovery people that I remember encountering in this industry was amazing at math, for
Yeah.
example. He'd go to, hey, I know that mixer, it's loaded. I know it weighs 60,000, so I got a rig like this. And if part of the rigging gets stressed more than the other, I got to build in an advantage. I got to build in a mechanical advantage. I mean,
Right.
so yeah, we want guys out there to know what they're doing. And so I support rigorous testing standards. I think that if you were to, I mean, I don't think anyone would argue with this, for example, that if you just look at it in terms of the standards that the government establishes to drive a vehicle, I think many of us would look at it and say, dude, it's not enough. Look at these bozos on the road, right? Like,
Did
I
you
know that's very,
did
very
you take
broad, but
driver's ed?
yeah, exactly. So I think having rigorous standards, I think, is virtuous. And I think that it does translate in the aggregate to having a more informed and more capable tower on the roadway, as you mentioned,
Yeah,
particularly in heavy duty recovery. This is no joke, man. This is not pulling a car out of the mud. This is lifting big weight. There's a propensity or a possibility, I should say, for disaster to strike.
right.
People can get killed, maimed, severely injured. So yeah, I really, I mean, so for those of you listening out there, we will have links in the podcast description for Erska, for Wreckmaster, for Tow Tools, of course. Uh,
Yeah,
if you haven't yet invested in your training, I really strongly, I think Adam and I agree on this, suggest you do so. Um,
highly.
thank you for bringing that up, Adam. I appreciate that. Hey,
Yeah,
I
I'm
wanted
I'm
to
looking
thank
up
you
something that
again.
I wanted to mention if I can
Yeah,
find it fast
absolutely. Go
enough.
right ahead.
The uh, I can't. I don't know if I can find it fast enough. But anyway, so there are lots of organizations that are, when we talk about regulation coming,
Yeah,
lots of organizations that are um, working on legislation and lobbying, not only your state governments but the federal government as well. So each state has its own association of towers, and sometimes that can be like, we saw it in California.
yeah,
There's like a Mason-Dixon line in California where the North doesn't like the South doesn't like the
sure.
North, and nobody gets along and nothing gets done. Um, but at some point, when we work past that, when we can find things that we can agree on, and we can drive that through to the regulators in each of our state, the government, the elected officials that are supposed to represent us, if they don't hear from us, they're representing somebody. It's just maybe not you.
Yeah,
They're representing what might be the largest donor. It might be the loudest voice in the room. So
yeah.
sometimes you have to be both. Sometimes you have
Somebody
to
who has
be
an interest in one
exactly.
side over the other. Absolutely.
Exactly. So when you look at this, you're like, wow, we're just getting hit on all sides, and all this stuff is just putting me out of business. Well, you've got to get involved. You've got to get in with the coalitions. You've got to get in with the associations and the groups that are working on this stuff, so that your voice is heard.
Yeah,
That's the only way that this stuff happens. It's our subdivision that we live in, just as an example, it's an HOA.
Mm.
Everybody's got an HOA. I think
I'm
HOAs are
sorry to hear that.
the bane of human existence is an HOA. You want to know where government goes wrong? It starts with an HOA. It's
Yes.
somebody telling you what you can do with your property that you own.
Yeah.
What a horrible idea. But anyways, um, everybody comes in, they buy all the houses. This is our subdivision is only a couple years old. We all had to sign the HOA. They
Yeah.
get in, then they read it, and they figure out, oh crap, I can't park on the street. Well, you signed it. You have to
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
responsibility. You have
Yeah.
to you have to get involved. You can't complain about it. If you don't get involved, you don't get your voice heard, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So regulation, yeah, it's bringing the training along with it. Training is extremely important. It may force you to update equipment. That's expensive. That's but you've got to communicate the pricing stuff to the motoring public and to the legislators and all that kind of stuff. So it's hugely important to get involved in
Yeah.
those things, and that's really the biggest change that I see coming to our industry.
Yeah. To everybody out there listening, join and or donate and or
Yeah,
serve your state, local, regional towing association. It's one of the ways that you can combat incoming legislation that's bad. Obviously, sometimes we say, hey, this is a good thing. but sometimes it's not a good thing. And for example, we're fighting an EV truck mandate in California as we speak. For those of you that know me, and for those of you that don't, I'm a huge electric vehicle advocate. I think they're great. However, for our sector, we're not there yet. And
Right.
so the imposition on our industry for EV truck mandates, we feel is not in the best interest of the industry and will tremendously raise costs. So for those of you out there listening, again, as Adam mentioned, get involved
Yeah.
because that is one way. Adam, I've taken up a ton of your time. I want to join you. Excuse me. I want to thank you again for joining this podcast. I did want to ask before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to bring awareness to?
Oh boy. Uh, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. We've covered the entire industry. We've solved everybody's problems. I don't know if there's anything more we need to talk about.
By the way, I'd love to do this again as
Yeah.
changes happen. So obviously feel free. And for those of you listening, again, there will be links in the video description for training on a national scale, local scale. We will do the best we can to insert links for that. And another reminder, if you aren't willing to know, please don't tow. Adam, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Art. Pleasure being here.